If you like break your arm, the diagnosis is incredibly easy. You
Hmm.
go to the hospital, you sit in front of the machine, they take an x-ray, and you look at the screen.
Right. It's right there.
Yeah, exactly. You see the bone, you see the jagged white line running right through the radius, and the doctor points at it and says, there it is, that's the problem. It's binary, it's clean.
It's either broken or it's not.
Right. And it provides this immediate sense of relief, even if it physically hurts. We have a deep psychological need for our problems to be visible, you know? We want them quantifiable, neatly
I
categorized.
want to see the boundaries of the issue.
Exactly. But the second you try to apply that same diagnostic precision to your own mind, the moment you step into the world of human consciousness or spiritual evolution, that x-ray machine is just, it's completely shattered.
Oh, totally. The diagnostic waters get incredibly muddy.
Yeah, you wander into the spirituality and self-help section of a bookstore, an actual physical bookstore, if you remember what those smell like, and you just stand there looking at the shelves. The sheer volume of options is entirely paralyzing. It's overwhelming.
It really is. You've got rows of beautifully bound books on mindfulness sitting right next to, I don't know, translations of ancient Vedic texts. Modern, hyper-optimized biohacking guides are sharing shelf space with treatises on healing crystals.
It has become a literal supermarket of the soul.
Oh, I love that. A supermarket of the soul.
Yeah.
That is the perfect way to put it. And for most of us, we're just wandering the aisles of this supermarket with our little shopping carts, completely overwhelmed by the inventory.
She's grabbing whatever looks good.
Right. We grab a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We toss a hot yoga class into the cart. Then we add a guided meditation app subscription. Maybe we sprinkle in some specific breathing technique we saw an influencer doing on social media.
And you just throw all these completely disparate ingredients into the cart.
Yeah, and we're just blindly hoping it makes a nutritious meal. But deep down, there's this gnawing question that keeps us up at night. Like, are we actually following a recipe? Is there a legitimate map for this stuff? Or are we just throwing combustible ingredients into a pot and hoping it doesn't explode?
Exactly.
The anxiety you're describing, it stems directly from the paradox of abundance. Think about the historical context for a moment.
Okay.
A peasant living in the 14th century had an incredibly limited spiritual menu. They had the local village priest, the dogma of their immediate community, and perhaps a vague whispered rumor of a mystic living in a cave 3 towns over.
That was the whole menu.
Right, that was the entirety of their access to the spiritual world. Today, the situation's completely inverted. We have the exact opposite problem. We have the entire recorded history of human consciousness across every culture and epoch sitting in our pockets.
On our phones, yeah.
We have unprecedented access, but absolutely zero context.
We have all the dots, but someone forgot to hand us the pen to draw the lines between them.
Right. Humans are natural taxonomists. We make sense of the world by categorizing it. We crave structure and hierarchy. In the academic world, you know exactly where you stand.
You know, if you're a freshman, a sophomore, or, defending your doctoral thesis.
Exactly. But in the spiritual realm, because of this massive influx of disconnected information, we lack the syllabus. We have no mechanism to determine if we are sitting in spiritual kindergarten playing with blocks or if we are actually working on a PhD-level problem.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today. We are going to decipher a very specific, fiercely confident map of spiritual progress.
And it's a fascinating map.
It really is. We're going to use this source material to help you, the listener, identify exactly where you are stationed on your own personal journey. And we are going to uncover the rather radical truth about what actually happens when someone reaches the absolute peak of human potential.
Which is not what most people think it is.
Not at all. The source we are unpacking today centers on a 4-stage map provided by a practitioner and teacher known as the Man from Oz. He goes by Osman.
Also known as the blind Muslim yogi.
Yes, Osman, the blind Muslim yogi. He lays out this strictly linear progression of spiritual advancement.
And the linearity is what makes this map so provocative. Much of modern spiritual discourse prefers shapes like spirals or chaotic webs.
Right, people love to say everyone's journey is different.
Which is a comforting thought, but often entirely unhelpful when you're genuinely lost. Osman presents a ladder. It is a straight, sequential shot upward from the intellectual gathering of basic ideas all the way to a state he describes as non-experience total.
Before we actually look at the 4 rungs of this ladder, we have to We have to scrutinize the cartographer. Whenever someone hands you a map of the soul or a map of reality itself, the very first question has to be, have you actually been there?
You want to know their credentials.
Exactly. If I am buying a travel guide to Paris, I want it written by someone who has walked the streets of Paris for years. I don't want a guide written by someone who just watched a documentary about the Eiffel Tower and decided to monetize their notes.
Well, the currency of authority shifts dramatically depending on the field you're in. In orthodox science, the currency of authority is the peer-reviewed paper. It relies on reproducibility by independent third parties.
Sure.
But in the realm of esoteric spirituality and inner technology, the currency of authority is time and state. How long have you been doing the practice, and what internal states have you stabilized?
Okay, so let's look at Osman's resume. The source material says he has 50 years of advanced yoga and meditation practice. 50 years.
It's a staggering number.
It really is. If you've been maintaining an advanced, rigorous internal practice for half a century, you have watched the world completely reinvent itself multiple times. You've weathered every single cultural shift, every new age fad, every wellness trend that has flared up and burned out.
It implies a foundation built on absolute bedrock. And it's important to highlight some specific details about him from the text. He mentions that he has been permanently blind since May 2023.
Right, which is a really crucial detail.
It is. Because so many times in his videos, he describes things using highly visual language things that can only be described by someone with eyesight.
And he explains that this is because he had his sight, as a normal person for the rest of his life before May 2023, so he relies on that visual memory.
Exactly. And his credentials go much further. He is a master-level bioenergy healer. He has telepathic healing capabilities using the principles of quantum entanglement.
And he specializes in critical care, recovery, and terminal illnesses. We're going to dive deep into that later because it's mind-blowing.
We definitely will.
Yeah.
But the source also states he has studied extensively from various schools of thought from the Far East, the Middle East, and the West. And here is the kicker. He attained his first samadhi experience by the age of 19.
Okay, I have to throw a flag on the play right there. I read through the source material, and when I hit that claim, I just stopped completely. Samadhi at 19.
It's a bold claim.
Samadhi, as I understand it, is the absolute ultimate state of meditative union. It is the pinnacle. When I was 19 years old, my biggest concerns were figuring out how to pass my midterms and wondering why the person I liked wasn't texting me back.
Yeah, typical teenage stuff.
Right. In every traditional text I've ever read, Samadhi is the gold watch. It is the retirement package they hand you after you have spent 40 years sweeping the temple courtyard and staring at a blank wall. How does someone achieve the ultimate goal of a lifetime of spiritual practice before their biological brain is even fully developed?
Well, your skepticism is warranted. A 19-year-old brain is still actively pruning synapses. The prefrontal cortex is still under construction. But if we analyze this through the lens of developmental neurobiology combined with intensive practice, the timeline actually presents a fascinating possibility.
Really? How so?
The adolescent brain possesses a degree of neuroplasticity, the ability of the nervous system to rewire its structural connections in response to stimuli that an older adult simply does not have. It is highly malleable.
So you're saying youth is an advantage, not a detriment?
Under very specific, extreme conditions, yes. You hear this discussed on places like the Huberman Lab podcast, right?
Oh, yeah. Professor Andrew Huberman talks about neuroplasticity all the time.
Exactly. Huberman constantly breaks down how focus and deliberate practice rewire neural pathways. Now imagine taking that Huberman protocol and multiplying it by 100. If a young person subjects their nervous system to rigorous, unyielding, esoteric practices for hours a day, they are laying down new neural circuitry at a velocity that would be nearly impossible for a 50-year-old starting from scratch.
That makes sense. And the source notes that during certain stages of his life, Osman's intensive practice extended up to 18 hours a day.
Yes, 18 hours.
18 hours a day of meditation and yoga. That leaves, 6 hours for sleeping and eating? That isn't a hobby. That is a complete unyielding siege on the nervous system.
It is. And that level of intensity provides the necessary context for his other major claim, the daily control and development of Kundalini energy.
Okay, we need to unpack the word Kundalini, because if you mention that term today, most people immediately picture a trendy, slightly overpriced breathwork class in a boutique studio.
Right. They think of people wearing white linen and doing some aggressive breathing to feel a little lightheaded.
Yeah, exactly. But what are we actually talking about when this text refers to advanced Kundalini development?
We have to divorce the term from its modern, watered-down commercial usage. In advanced esoteric architecture, Kundalini refers to a dormant, primal, evolutionary energy situated at the base of the human spine. You can think of it as the raw, unrefined power source of human consciousness.
Like a generator.
Yes. Waking it up safely is not a matter of taking a weekend workshop. It requires immense, microscopic technical mastery over the body's internal systems.
I've heard warnings about it, people talking about Kundalini syndrome, where they try to force it and end up completely destabilized.
A helpful analogy is the electrical grid. Imagine the standard wiring inside your house. It is designed to handle 120 volts to power your toaster and your television. Now imagine trying to run high-voltage industrial electricity, the kind that powers a city block, through that standard household wire.
The wire will instantly melt. The house will catch fire.
Exactly. The system is destroyed because the physical infrastructure was not built to handle the voltage. Kundalini is the high-voltage electricity. The 50 years of discipline, the 18-hour practice days, that is the process of slowly upgrading the nervous system's wiring so it can channel that massive energy without resulting in physical tremors, psychosis, or total nervous system collapse.
Wow.
To claim daily control over this energy implies a profoundly engineered internal physiology.
So we have a cartographer who claims to have rewired his entire physiology, hit the peak state at 19, and has spent half a century teaching the mechanics of this process. With those credentials established, let's step onto the very first rung of his ladder.
Level 1.
Yes, level 1, which the map calls the foundation. And listener, as we describe this, it is probably going to sound uncomfortably familiar. The text defines level 1 as the stage of involvement in religion, spiritual practices, research, and knowledge seeking.
Research and knowledge seeking. This is the realm of the intellect. It is the information gathering phase of the human journey.
I like to think of level 1 using a restaurant analogy. I call it the menu versus the lasagna problem.
I like where this is going.
Imagine you walk into an incredible, one-renowned Italian restaurant. You sit down and they hand you the menu. You look at the description of the lasagna, you read about the handmade pasta, the slow-simmered ragu, the exact origin of the San Marzano tomatoes, and the aging process of the cheese. You memorize every single ingredient.
You know everything about the dish.
Everything. You can recite the history of how the dish was created. You can debate the merits of this lasagna versus a lasagna from another region. But reading the menu, studying the menu, memorizing the menu is not the same thing as eating the meal. You can be the world's foremost expert on the menu and still starve to death.
That analogy perfectly captures the limitation of level 1. At this stage, spirituality is strictly an object. It is something entirely separate from you. It is a concept that you collect, categorize, study, or watch from a distance.
You're just observing it.
Right. You are the subject, and the spiritual knowledge is the object you are consuming. The architecture of your reality hasn't fundamentally changed. You've just chosen a more high-minded topic to think about.
The map makes a very provocative claim here. It states that simply belonging to a religion, knowing all the dogma, reciting the prayers perfectly, attending the services every week, keeps you firmly anchored at level 1. It classifies all of that as dry land.
It is a controversial point, but logically consistent within the framework of the map. Knowing the rules of a religion is like knowing the chemical formula for water. You can write H2O on a chalkboard. You can explain its freezing point and its boiling point.
You can write a brilliant essay on the fluid dynamics of water.
But until you physically jump into the pool, you are not wet. Institutional affiliation, belief systems, and intellectual agreement do not alter the autonomic nervous system or the baseline state of consciousness. Advancement requires internal mechanical transformation, not just intellectual alignment.
This feels like the ultimate trap of the modern era. Think about what we do. We consume information constantly.
Constantly.
Look at the podcast landscape. We listen to this deep dive. Or you listen to the School of Greatness podcast with Lewis Howes.
Oh yeah, Lewis Howes has incredible guests.
He does. He brings on people like Tony Robbins or Deepak Chopra, and you listen to them talk about the mind and potential and the universe, and you get so fired up.
It's extremely motivating.
Or you listen to the Soul Boom podcast with Rainn Wilson, and they have these beautiful, deep conversations about spirituality and society, and it's wonderful. But we trick ourselves into feeling like we are making genuine spiritual progress just because we are consuming high-quality information about spiritual progress.
It is a very seductive trap because the acquisition of knowledge triggers a dopamine release in the brain. You finish a thick book on meditation, or you finish an episode of The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, where he's interviewing someone about mindset, and you feel a sense of accomplishment.
You feel elevated, like you did something.
But that feeling is temporary, and when it fades, your baseline reactivity to stress, your anxieties, your egoic attachments, they are all exactly the same as they were before you opened the book or hit play on the podcast.
You are still a spectator sitting in the stands, analyzing the game, but you haven't set foot on the field.
Exactly. You're an armchair quarterback for your own soul.
So it makes you wonder, are you, the person listening to this right now, using this very deep dive as a substitute for actual practice? Are you just collecting spiritual baseball cards? You know the stats of all the players, you've read Tony Robbins, you've listened to Deepak Chopra, but you don't actually play the game.
And if level 1 is the library, where you study the maps and read the menus, then to progress, the thinker has to eventually leave the library. They have to put the book down. This brings us to the transition into level 2, the laboratory.
According to Osman, the transition to level 2 happens when you cross a very specific psychological threshold. He says you move to level 2 when you become convinced and enter into esoteric practices like mantra, breathwork, yoga, and meditation.
Convinced. That's a strong word.
I want to zero in on it. He doesn't say when you become interested or when you become curious. He uses the word convinced.
It is the pivotal flip in the entire map. Being curious keeps you in the library. Curiosity asks, what if? Conviction asks, how? When you are convinced, you have moved past the hypothetical. You possess an undeniable certainty that there is a tangible reality beyond your current perception, and that certainty compels you to act. You stop being a noun, an enthusiast, a researcher, a believer, and you become a verb.
You become the scientist operating your own nervous system as the laboratory. And the text says you do this through esoteric practices. Now, in popular culture, the word esoteric has taken on a lot of baggage. It sounds spooky or weird or like something that requires wearing a robe in a dark room.
That is a total misunderstanding of the term. In this context, esoteric does not mean spooky. It simply means specialized internal technology designed to unlock hidden physiological or psychological mechanisms.
So it's inward-facing.
Yes. Exoteric practices are outward-facing, going to a public building, participating in a group ritual. Esoteric practices are inward-facing. It is the mechanical application of focused attention, breath regulation, and energetic locks to change the state of the machine from the inside out.
I understand the theory, but I have to push back on the reality of level 2. Because frankly, level 2 sounds like an absolute grind.
It is a grind.
Isn't this the phase where almost everyone quits? You transition from reading fascinating books to sitting on a cushion. Your back hurts, your nose itches, your knee is screaming at you.
Your mind is racing.
You are constantly wondering if you remembered to lock the front door or if you left the stove on. You sit there for an hour and absolutely nothing magical happens. It is boring. How is someone supposed to survive the brutal friction of rewiring their brain without getting any immediate reward?
You've identified exactly why the word convinced is a prerequisite. If you are only curious, the friction of the itching nose and the aching back will defeat you. You will rationalize getting off the cushion. You will say, this isn't for me, or I'll just go read another book instead.
Right, you'll go back to level 1.
But if you are convinced, you endure the friction because you understand it is structurally necessary.
How is the boredom and the pain structurally necessary?
Let's look at it through the lens of physical fitness. You cannot think your way into a six-pack. You cannot read a book about dumbbells and expect your bicep to grow.
Obviously not.
Muscle growth requires micro-tears. It requires the physical agitation of the tissue against resistance. Neurological and spiritual growth operates on a very similar principle. Neuroplasticity, the rewiring of the brain that Huberman talks about, requires focus, and focus generates metabolic friction. It is uncomfortable by design.
Oh, wow.
When you are sitting in the laboratory of level 2, practicing a mantra or a breathwork protocol, you are actively resisting the brain's default mode network. You are forcing the chaotic, scattered energy of the mind into a single, concentrated point.
So the boredom isn't a sign that the practice is failing. The boredom is the resistance weight you are lifting.
Precisely. You are fundamentally changing the baseline autonomic arousal of your nervous system. You are widening the gap between a stimulus and your reaction to it. That doesn't happen through epiphanies. It happens through the mundane, repetitive, unglamorous execution of the esoteric practice. It takes hundreds, if not thousands of hours on the cushion.
And this friction is exactly why getting started is so hard. It reminds me of the Mel Robbins podcast, actually.
Oh, with her 5-second rule.
Yes, her
Yeah.
whole philosophy is that you have a 5-second window to act before your brain talks you out of doing something uncomfortable. You just count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and move.
Which is a great psychological hack for overcoming that initial resistance.
Exactly. And Osman has created something similar to break down the barrier to entry for level 2 because he knows staring down thousands of hours of meditation is intimidating. So he explicitly offers a free, downloadable 5-minute yoga and meditation program on his website, yogawellness786.com.
Just 5 minutes.
Just 5 minutes. He understands the psychology of the barrier to entry. Getting someone to simply start level 2, to give them a highly simplified, result-based methodology that they can execute in 5 minutes without feeling overwhelmed, is the hardest part of the equation.
And that ties perfectly into his stated mission. He wants to encourage people into a scientific approach using simplified methodology from ancient sciences. He's trying to build a bridge so people can actually walk out of the library and step into the laboratory without immediately running away from the friction.
Right, and again, that's entirely free on his site, yogawellness786.com. He also gives away tons of info on his YouTube channel without withholding anything.
It is a very pragmatic approach to an ancient problem. And if a practitioner uses those tools and sits in that laboratory long enough, enduring the friction and applying the technique, the internal wiring eventually connects.
The micro tears heal and the muscle grows.
Exactly. The seeds that were planted in the rocky, boring, difficult soil of level 2 finally begin to break open. The nervous system upgrades, and that upgrade launches the practitioner into an entirely new phase of existence. This brings us to level 3, maturation.
Here is where the map gets wild. If level 2 is the boring, gritty laboratory, level 3 sounds like stepping straight into a science fiction novel. The source text describes level 3 as featuring profound mystical experiences. It explicitly mentions perceiving the multidimensional nature of existence and noticing beings from higher frequencies. The boundaries of reality become completely fluid.
In level 3, the veil between realities thins out. The sensory apparatus of the human body, which has been rigorously trained, purified, and sensitized through the discipline of level 2, begins to decode much wider bandwidths of information.
I love the radio dial analogy for this.
Go for it.
Imagine you are born, and the radio in your car is superglued to FM 98.6. For your entire life, you listen to that one station. You think that one station is the entirety of all music, news, and sound in the universe. But in level 3, the glue dissolves. You reach out, you turn the dial, and suddenly you hear thousands of other stations.
Frequencies you never knew existed.
Yeah, you hear classical, jazz, frequencies you don't even have names for. You realize the air around you has always been thick with other signals. Your receiver was just too dense to pick them up. It sounds absolutely incredible. Who wouldn't want to live in level 3?
It does sound incredible, and by all accounts, the phenomena experienced at this stage are profoundly beautiful and paradigm-shifting. You hear people talk about this on podcasts all the time.
Like on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Exactly. Joe Rogan has guests on constantly who describe these exact multidimensional states, usually achieved through psychedelics like DMT or psilocybin. They talk about seeing entities, perceiving higher frequencies, the whole thing.
Right, but those are chemically induced temporary states.
Right.
Osman is talking about stabilizing this organically through decades of practice.
Correct. And even more specifically, you hear about these organic awakenings on a show like Buddha at the Gas Pump with Rick Archer.
Oh, Batchy AP. That's a great show.
Rick Archer interviews people who have had profound spiritual awakenings. And he's had experts on, like Dr. Bonnie Greenwell, who explicitly studied Kundalini awakenings. Or you read the works of Gopi Krishna, who documented his own terrifying and beautiful Kundalini awakening.
Right.
They all describe these immense, overwhelming, energetic, and perceptual shifts. However, this is where Osman's map introduces a crucial warning. In almost every orthodox tradition of inner engineering, level 3 is considered a massive danger zone. It is a trap.
Wait, how is experiencing multidimensional reality a trap? You're seeing the underlying fabric of existence. You are perceiving higher frequencies. Isn't that the literal definition of spiritual success?
It is a marker of progress, but it is not the destination. The trap lies in what we call spiritual tourism, and it is the ultimate snare for the human ego.
Spiritual tourism.
Imagine you have worked for years in the boring laboratory of level 2. Suddenly the lights turn on. You experience visions, profound synchronicities, perhaps even what texts call cities or yogic powers. What does the ego do?
They grab on.
It latches onto these experiences. It builds a new, even stronger identity around them.
Oh, I see. The ego says, look at me. Look how special I am. I can perceive higher frequencies. I see angels. I'm spiritually advanced, while everyone else is just a normal, unenlightened person.
Exactly. The ego will use absolutely anything to ensure its own survival, including your spiritual attainments. It hijacks the mystical experience and turns it into a badge of superiority. And if we look closely at the underlying architecture of level 3, we realize a devastating truth. Fundamentally, the architecture hasn't actually changed from level 1.
Let me make sure I'm following this. In level 1, the architecture is a subject, me consuming an object, a book about spirituality. You're saying level 3 is the exact same geometry.
Yes, there is still a distinct you, the subject, who is consuming a magical vision or a mystical state, which is the object.
Hmm.
The dichotomy of observer and observed remains fully intact. You haven't actually dissolved the illusion of separation. You have merely upgraded the product you were consuming.
From a book to a vision.
Exactly. Instead of consuming a paperback book, you are now consuming a multi-dimensional special effect. It is a more entertaining distraction, but it is still a distraction. This is why great masters throughout history, like Swami Sivananda, constantly warn their students to ignore occult powers and mystical visions. They view them as scenic detours that prevent the seeker from reaching the actual summit.
So if you were chasing experiences in your life, even profoundly beautiful spiritual ones, just for the emotional high, you are fundamentally missing the point. If you meditate just to feel that little buzz of peace or to see pretty colors behind your eyelids, you are a spiritual tourist taking photos rather than aiming for foundational transformation.
Which brings us to the hardest step of all.
Because to reach the true peak of this map, Osman tells us that the practitioner must do the hardest thing imaginable. They must tear their eyes away from the ultimate light show of level 3 and step completely into the dark. They must step into level 4, the void.
The void. The source describes level 4 as the point where the samadhi or nirvana state matures into the non-dual state. The language used to describe it is purely negative. It is described by what is missing. No I, no mind, no experience, not experience total.
I have to stop right there and push back as hard as I can because everything in my biological programming is screaming that this sounds horrific.
It does sound intimidating.
No mind, no I, non-experience total. That doesn't sound like spiritual liberation. That sounds like death. It sounds like logging out of the human simulation entirely. Why would anyone dedicate 50 years of their life practicing 18 hours a day, weathering the boredom of level 2 and ignoring the magic of level 3, just to arrive at a state where they are essentially a vegetative monk drooling in a dark cave?
Why work so hard just to annihilate yourself?
Exactly.
It is the most natural human reaction to fear the void, and that fear is rooted in the paradox of non-duality. The human mind, the intellect, the ego, is a tool designed to process dualities. Hot and cold, up and down, me and you. The mind simply cannot comprehend its own absence.
It doesn't have the hardware for it.
Right, it's like asking a flashlight to shine a beam onto its own bulb. The tool is incapable of the task. So when the mind tries to imagine no mind, it projects its own worst fear. It pictures a dark, empty room. It pictures a loss of identity, a sensory deprivation tank of nothingness. But level 4 is not a loss. It is a profound, ultimate unburdening.
Can you give me an analogy for that unburdening? Because non-experience total still sounds like my hard drive being completely erased.
Let's use your hard drive analogy. Imagine your computer processor. Right now, as a normal human being, you have 1,000 browser tabs open in your mind.
At least 1,000.
You have the anxieties of level 1, the disciplined routines of level 2, the thrilling, overwhelming visions of level 3. You're running background programs of childhood trauma, social expectations, and future planning. The processor is entirely clogged, the fan is screaming, the machine is constantly overheating just to maintain the illusion of the small self, the ego that thinks it has to manage all these tabs.
That sounds exhausting and familiar.
Level 4 is the act of closing every single tab. It is not destroying the computer. It is returning the processor to a state of absolute frictionless zero.
And so it is the collapse of separation.
Yes. In level 4, you are no longer the subject watching the universe as a separate object. You are the universe. The boundary line of the skin dissolves. The anxious ego drops away completely. The reason it is called non-experience total is because for an experience to happen, there must be someone there to experience it.
Oh, wow. If the experiencer merges entirely with the experience, the concept of an event happening to someone ceases to exist.
Exactly. You see this described in the lives of the great saints. If you look at the Ranveer Show podcast, Beer Biceps, He frequently interviews monks and scholars who talk about the intense sadhana of figures like Ramakrishna or Swami Vivekananda.
Yes, Ramakrishna famously entered states of samadhi where he was completely unresponsive to the outside world for days.
Or look at Yogananda. In his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, he describes samadhi as a state where the ocean of the spirit becomes one with the drop of the soul. The separate self vanishes.
This is where language just structurally shatters, isn't it? If we dive into the linguistics of this, it's impossible to talk about. Human language requires a subject, a verb, and an object. I see the tree. The I is the subject, the tree is the object, and see is the action connecting them.
But if you reach level 4,
Right, if you reach level 4 and the separation between the I and the tree collapses, who is seeing, the verb dissolves, the sentence breaks, language fundamentally fails.
which is why the deepest truths in these ancient sciences are always described as indescribable. The map brings us to the edge of the cliff of language, and then language falls away.
So we reach the void, the I is completely gone. Is that the end of the map? Does the master just dissolve into the ether and stay in the void forever?
No. And this is the most beautiful part.
It is the most jarring, unexpected twist I have ever seen in a spiritual map. The master does not stay in the void, he comes back. And he sets up a practice to help people.
The return. This is the hallmark of the most mature, advanced spiritual development across numerous ancient traditions. It mirrors the concept of the bodhisattva, the liberated being who attains the ultimate reality, but consciously chooses to return to the marketplace, to the suffering world, to serve others.
And the specifics of that help are fascinating. Immediately after describing this ultimate void of non-duality, the source text pivots sharply to offering profound, intensely practical help in the physical world.
He operates as a master-level bioenergy healer, using telepathic capability and the principles of quantum entanglement.
And he specializes in critical care, recovery, and terminal illnesses, conditions where traditional medical science has hit a wall or failed. Now, we have to be extremely clear here, as the source material is, his services are not a replacement for medical treatment.
Absolutely not. They are meant to enhance whatever is lacking in the other medical fields.
Right. But due to his very high success rate over the past 50 years, his extensive study, and that rigorous 18-hour-a-day practice we talked about, he has developed this uncommon ability to heal on very serious levels.
And that level of intense, premium, critical care healing is why his private treatments and consultation fees are not inexpensive.
Which makes sense, but the contrast is just so striking. You have the deeply philosophical, indescribable, non-dual reality standing directly next to the gritty, urgent, physical reality of terminal illness.
But what the return proves is that reaching level 4 is not an escape hatch. It isn't about becoming less capable or retreating to a mountain. It is about returning to the physical world as a high-performance vehicle for consciousness.
It makes me think of a drone shot.
A drone shot.
Yeah, think about it. In levels 1 and 2, you are a rat lost inside a massive hedge maze. You are bumping into walls, you get stuck in dead ends, and you can't see over the hedges. It's frustrating and terrifying.
Because you only see what's directly in front of you.
Exactly. Level 4 is the drone shot. You launch up into the sky, and you finally see the entire map of the maze all at once. You see the entrance, the exit, the center. When you return to the maze, when you come back to the physical world to serve, you are back on the ground, walking the same dirt paths as everyone else, but you navigate it effortlessly, without fear, because you retain the perspective of the drone.
That is a perfect encapsulation of the upgraded processor. When Osman engages in telepathic healing using quantum entanglement for someone on the exact opposite side of the planet, he is applying that drone perspective.
Because distance doesn't exist up there.
Exactly. In the realm of quantum physics, distance is an illusion. Two entangled particles mirror each other instantaneously, regardless of the physical space between them. For a master who has permanently dissolved the illusion of separation in level 4, the idea that a patient is 10,000 miles away is simply a level 1 construct. The distance doesn't exist in the non-dual state.
It's incredible. And he offers so many different tiers of help. Like we mentioned, he has the free 5-minute program on his website, yogawellness786.com. He puts all his core teachings on his free YouTube channel. But then he also has a Patreon channel for paid live daily video lessons, one-to-one consultations, and group sessions.
Right. He engages in the mechanics of the physical world, managing a website, offering premium life and death critical care consultations, running a Patreon without absorbing the friction of the physical world.
Because the small self, the ego that would normally get stressed about running a business or overwhelmed or prideful about having a high success rate in terminal healing, has been permanently deleted.
It has. This completely flips our modern fear of losing the ego on its head. In the corporate world, in daily life, we are terrified of losing our ego because we're convinced it gives us our competitive edge.
We think our anxiety, our drive for recognition is what makes us successful.
But this map is telling us that the ego is actually a massive source of internal friction. Losing the ego doesn't make you a passive vegetable. It makes you more effective, more capable, and infinitely more helpful in your service to others. You operate with zero drag.
You become an unimpeded conduit. Let's trace the full ecosystem of this map to see the complete journey.
We begin as the intellectual seeker at level 1, wandering the supermarket aisles, reading the menus, and substituting podcasts and books for actual practice.
Then, driven by an undeniable conviction, we step into the laboratory of level 2, embracing the disciplined, often uncomfortable grind of esoteric practice to systematically rewire our nervous system.
This maturation launches us into level 3, the mystical voyager, where the multidimensional nature of reality opens up. But we must remain vigilant against the ultimate ego trap of spiritual tourism.
Right. Chasing the fireworks, piercing through those visions, we surrender to level 4, the non-dual void, where the I is entirely dropped and the system reboots.
And finally, the map concludes with the triumphant, upgraded return to the mundane world, existing purely as an instrument of service.
So as you reflect on this map, remember that it is designed for orientation, not for judgment. It isn't here to make you feel bad about where you are. It is here to tell you why you might feel stuck. Are you currently frustrated because you are trying to solve a level 2 practice problem using only level 1 reading tools?
The ultimate goal of climbing this ladder isn't to escape the world. It is to bring the clarity and power from the absolute peak back down to the ground to heal the people around you.
And if you want to take that very first practical step from the library into the laboratory, you can go grab that free 5-minute program at yogawellness786.com. The cartographer isn't hiding the starting line.
It is about radical honesty with yourself, knowing exactly where your feet are planted so you know exactly which direction to step next.
I want to leave you with one final, lingering question to ponder on your own. We started this deep dive by talking about X-rays, medical precision, and our desire to know exactly what we're looking at. But if we follow the logic of this map to its absolute conclusion, if reaching level 4 means the complete and permanent destruction of the I and the ego, and you subsequently return to the physical world with this renewed capacity to heal, to speak, and to function, who or what exactly is driving your body?
That's the real question.
If the original you is truly gone, extinguished in the void, is the being that returns simply the universe itself, wearing your face and mimicking your personality just to make the people around you comfortable? Are enlightened masters essentially benevolent, empty suits operating quietly in our midst?
That question challenges the very foundation of what we consider human identity to be.
It is definitely something to chew on while you are wandering the aisles of your own spiritual supermarket, deciding what to put in your cart next. Keep climbing, keep questioning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.